This is the Simpit. I'm your host Sean Cole, but the real star of today's show is Rock Solid Rigs out of the United Kingdom, and they are the makers of the RSR-21 sim racing chassis. The RSR-21 is, as they put it, the original wooden sim racing chassis, and it offers a modular, add what you need later design to it. The RSR-21 was designed by F1 engineer Mark Foster, and when creating this marvel, they are looking for a no-compromise chassis that offered all the structural needs, all of the adjustability and compatibility needs that a modern sim racer would need. The RSR-21 is made out of structural grade Baltic birch, meaning that it is incredibly strong and it is really ultimately customizable. The RSR-21 is a modular design, as I mentioned, meaning you can start off with the base, which is again entirely made of that Baltic birch except for the hardware attached to it, and that goes for €299 or just a hair under $350. That base is then a seat away from being an entire rig, and then you can add the design as you need. For example, there is a single monitor mount that we are also testing that will set you back €89 or $103. Then there are the wings for the second and third monitor for an additional €89 or $103, as well as a fourth or overhead monitor mount for €49 or $57. There's a shifter mount for €29 or $34, and a larger side mount for €36 or $42, as well as a keyboard and mouse mount for €49 or $57. Our RSR-21, as tested, was about €559 or $634, and that includes the base, the single monitor mount, along with the keyboard and shifter mounts. A fully equipped version like ours, plus the triple monitor mount, plus the fourth monitor mount, and the large platform would run you €768 or about $871. When considering all that includes for that price, it is actually fairly reasonable. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at the RSR-21 and some of its features, starting off with, again, that base. And as you can see, it is a fairly unusual or unique design, unlike any other chassis I've ever seen. The RSR-21 gets its strength in a way similar to an aircraft, using a bulkhead design to achieve stiffness and rigidity. Now, some people might just see a wooden rig or a rig made of just common plywood, and that is the furthest thing from the case here. This cabinet birch is amazing, amazing wood. It is many, many layers. It is very dense. It has a very smooth finish. There are no rough edges, no splinters, no pieces cracking off or any of that kind of stuff that you would find on less expensive plywood. And measuring it at 3/4 of an inch, which is actually like 1 inch or 18 millimeter by lumber standards, it is very thick and very, very strong material. What impresses me the most about the RSR-21 is that it truly is an engineering marvel. It is built upon a combination of interlocking pieces with some slotted hardware, with some very easy to use locking nuts that slide right into holes and allow for super secure tightening with a single Allen wrench. In the adjustable areas of the rig, it uses these very large, very grippy, you can get a really good hold on tightening knobs that make it easy to make adjustments, and then when you do tighten them down, they tighten down very firmly. The overall shape of the chassis actually does remind me very much of like an old school wooden plane, or it's built like kind of like a submarine where they use those bulkheads to create so much structural rigidity within the rig. But at the same time, I do have to admit, there's something about it that kind of resembles one of those 3D children's puzzles of maybe a car or a dinosaur. It kind of has that look about it at the same time. So I find the best way to show off the adjustability of the rig or the finish of the pieces is to cover them while doing the assembly of the chassis when we're taking a real close-up look without any of our parts assembled on it. The RSR-21 comes in a very large flat pack box that is full of different shaped parts and hardware. The RSR-21 comes with all the hardware you need, along with a single Allen key, and the only tools that you're going to need from your house will be a hammer and a flathead screwdriver to align the locking down pins that we'll cover in the assembly. Now, there is a set of instructions that are also included, and it shows the RSR-21 in sort of an exploded view, which is a little bit hard to follow and makes it a little unclear exactly where to start. So I began by building the upright side supports, one per side. When looking at them, the wooden pieces have a very smooth finish to them, and the quality of the board is exceptional. You can see all the layers of the very thin wood and how perfectly and densely it is manufactured. Also perfectly done is the cutting of the pieces. The edges are also smooth and splinter-free, and you can run your fingers down the edge without cutting yourself on them. This includes nicely cut holes for all of the hardware to go in. The RSR-21 is designed a bit like, and it certainly assembles a lot like, putting together a piece of IKEA furniture. You have the holes in the wood, you have a locking nut that goes in, and you can use a fingernail or a screwdriver to align it so that the other piece goes in with a bolt and screws right into that piece of hardware, locking it down in place. And this is where I do want to add my own PSA. So like I said, the exploded view makes it a little bit hard to follow exactly where all the parts go. And one thing I will highly recommend is putting it together like kind of in front of you before you start putting in hardware. You will notice that pieces are directional. You'll have a concave spot, which is where the bolt is supposed to go through. And if you start putting things together backwards or inside out, you're gonna have to unassemble it and put it back together again, the proper orientation or direction. So again, just kind of look at the plans, space out the pieces, make sure you're putting it together in the direction that you want to. And I did make that mistake several times in the building process, and you probably will too. So just kind of think ahead a little bit. And anybody who's ever built a piece of Swedish furniture or a cabinet knows exactly what I'm talking about. So with the hardware installed into the square center braces, I bolted the upright pieces together, then went on to the main structure. I again point back to looking at the pieces and checking the direction for the hardware because I built this backward at first as well. There are two central supports that hold the two gigantic side pieces together. The cross braces are directional, and there is a cross brace between the cross braces that is also installed. They use the same locking hardware, and the bolts that go through the side of the chassis are the only bolt heads that stick out on the entire rig and are not recessed. The side uprights that we previously built then attach to the middle point of the main chassis. Each upright uses about 10 of the nuts to hold it to the side of the rig, and it really strengthens the wheel deck upright support section. The seat base is made up of a box made up of 4 pieces that form a square with a cross brace running down the middle. The entire thing assembles with the same hardware, but this is when you will need that hammer. After determining the proper direction of the pieces, 4 hammered-in nuts are added to allow for mounting this to the main chassis, and that also offers easy adjustment. After the nuts were added, I found it easier to mount the bottom pieces to the seat deck and then join those bottom pieces together after. Next is to build the pedal box, which outside of being smaller, assembles in the exact same way as the seat base. The bottom pieces make a square that attach to the bottom of the deck itself. There are also 4 additional nuts to be hammered in, and once again, I found it easier to add the pieces to the deck and then join the bottom pieces together after. Next up was the wheel deck section. It starts with the actual wheel deck that then has 2 side pieces along with 2 cross braces that box in the bottom. The side pieces each have a hammered in nut that goes into them, and this entire assembly is built with the same locking hardware as other parts of the chassis, including the tightening knobs going into the hammered in nuts. So now that we have all of our assemblies built, we can actually start putting them together, and that is actually very easy as well. The seat deck just slides in the rear section of the rig between the 2 side panels, and that seat deck ends up being about 50 centimeters or 19 3/4 inches wide by 50 centimeters or 19 3/4 front to back. It is pre-drilled for Sparco and other racing seat sizes. With the 4 tightening knobs, the deck can be installed into a variety of slots on the side of the RS-21 chassis. With the selection of different slots, you have a huge amount of adjustability as to where your seat will actually be. In total, there's about 12 centimeters or almost 4 3/4 inches of up and down adjustment, and by mounting the front or back at different heights, it gives you 32 degrees of freedom to lock down the right angle. Regardless of height and angle, there is still 20 centimeters or almost 8 inches of front-to-back mountability of the deck itself. Once happy, the 4 knobs are easily tightened and there is no sign of movement whatsoever the way the hardware locks into the grooves. The pedal deck is 50 centimeters or 19 3/4 inches wide by 37 centimeters or 14.5 inches front to back, and it attaches to the chassis in the exact same way. 4 tightening knobs, 1 per corner into your choice of 4 different slots to choose from for distance, height, and angle. You have the same 12 centimeters or almost 4 3/4 inches of up and down adjustment, along with the same 20 centimeters or almost 8 inches of front to back adjustability just like the seat. However, for the pedals, the angle adjustment is increased to 52 degrees of angle. The wheel deck, which is 50 centimeters or 19 3/4 inches wide by 22.2 centimeters or 8 3/4 inches front to back, that then slides down between the 2 heavily supported uprights. Towards the top, there are 2 more tightening knobs installed through the sides of the chassis and into the sides of the upright assembly. Toward the lower side, a slide bolt is installed from the inside and a tightening knob is installed on its end. This entire assembly can be moved up and down by 21 centimeters or 8 3/4 inches and can be tilted up to 50 degrees before locking it down in place. Along with the giant box that was sent to me by Rock Solid Rigs, there were 2 other boxes, and in the larger box there was actually the single monitor mount along with the shifter mount. In the second box were the parts for the keyboard and mouse tray. And I can say, after building the entire rig and getting acquainted with the way it goes together and the way to look at parts before I assemble them, putting these parts together went a whole lot easier, but we still did make a few errors and have to unbuild and rebuild once again. The shifter mount has 2 support arms that connect to the shifter deck with that slide-in hardware. There is also a backing plate for mounting to the rig that can be installed in 2 different directions for left or right hand installation. Once a direction is selected, 2 of the hammer-in nuts are installed prior to it being bolted to the shifter assembly. This allows for the shifter assembly to be mounted to the rig with 2 of the tightening knobs. It can be mounted to the chassis into the slots with an up and down adjustability of 24 centimeters or 9.5 inches. The shifter deck itself is about 16.2 centimeters or 6 3/8 inches wide by nearly 18 centimeters or 7 inches front to back. The monitor mount is another work of pure genius. It is also the most complicated part of the assembly and it is made up of 10 different wood pieces plus all the hardware. I started by laying out the pieces and looking at the instructions for reference. Once happy, I started with the 2 curved side pieces, interlocking them with the top of the mount. I could then install the nuts and preparing the back pieces by hammering in their nuts as well, which I installed the wrong way. The back pieces then perfectly fit over the pre-interlocked bottom parts and I added all of the bolts to hold down each side. I then started searching out all of the other spots these pieces attached and added the nuts and bolts to secure it all in place. There was also a small brace to secure the top even more and to act as the lockdown point for the monitor mount itself. This piece had a hammer-in nut added prior to installation. The monitor mount part of this assembly is a few different pieces that all connect together with a VESA adapter on one end and a wood plate that attaches to the lower assembly on the other. The VESA adapter has a nut installed and that final part attaches with a tightening knob. This assembly slides into the front top of the lower mount and locks down with a tightening knob on the lower part. There is actually a range of about 9.5 centimeters or 3 3/4 inches from front to back for the monitor, and the VESA adapter can be removed entirely via the tightening knob. Once complete, the entire structure slides down over the front of the rig and attaches to those side uprights just like the shifter did with 4 tightening knobs. The way the monitor mount is attached with the bolts into slots, you have about 25.5 centimeters or 10 inches of up and down adjustment for the monitor. Also included was the keyboard and mouse mount. It, like the shifter, can be installed on the left or right-hand side. And it can be mounted with the keyboard or mouse on the top or bottom as desired. There is a center brace that attaches to the top or bottom depending on orientation. There are also half circles that get hammered in nuts installed and then attached to the mounting bracket much like the shifter did. I once again installed these backwards and had to remove and properly install them later. I then attached that section to the rig on the upright opposite of the shifter, with 2 tightening knobs through each of the slots. This allowed for 30.5 centimeters or 12 inches of up and down adjustment. The keyboard section then bolts to the mount with 2 tightening knobs and can be pivoted forward and backward as desired. The overall measurement of the keyboard deck is about 50 millimeters or 19 5/8 inches by 18.5 centimeters or 7 1/4 inches front to back. There is also a half circle mouse tray that is about 20 centimeters or 8 inches wide. With our entire chassis built, which ended up taking me about 3 hours, but we still haven't installed our equipment, we get our first really good look at the chassis and the way it looks. And you can see it is an extremely unique design, one of a kind for sure. It is unlike anything that I've ever seen. I would almost call it naked, as it sits there in its natural color with no gear on it yet. Just looking at its design, you can see its massive amount of adjustability. It's got slotted channels for all that sweet seat and pedal freedom. It's got long slots on the uprights that allow for so much up and down. It also looks very stout and strong. In fact, at the Rock Solid website, they say it can support as much as 500 kilograms, that's 1,100 pounds. I think that's a new record, and it is definitely a testimonial of their strength. So I must say, looking at the Rock Solid rig, I'm intrigued. I'm very intrigued. I know it is odd, it is unconventional by today's standards, but I am very intrigued. And I have to say that after building it, after assembling it, and seeing all the adjustment, I'm 100% certain that it's going to completely dial in with all of our gear to perfection. And at about 76.2 centimeters or 30 inches wide by 142 centimeters or 56 inches long and 63.5 centimeters or 25 inches tall, it promises to fit any body type. After many years of assembling, building, and testing rigs, I have to tell you that working with wood is one of my favorite materials when it comes to mounting hardware, especially when you're using non-conventional hardware. It's one thing if you're using a Thrustmaster, Logitech, or Fanatic, because pretty much every rig is pre-drilled for them. But if you're using anything else, you're kind of on your own in many cases. And when working with wood, you just drill a hole. You just grab some wood screws and screw it on down, and that'll usually get the job done. Now, looking at the RSR-21 rig, it really has a fixed position for the wheel deck. Lots of adjustability in the tilt and in the height, but it's really going to be in that forward to back position. So the best way to size things or get things dialed in is really get the seat mounted up onto the rig and then start with that steering wheel where it's going to be and make adjustments to the seat and the pedals from there. And once again, my seat has those extra long rails with an angle on the end, and that required the addition of a bracket that I just wood screwed into the deck, putting one bracket for each side of the front side of the seat, and that allowed me to firmly bolt the seat to the bracket. In the back, I just used 2 wood screws and mounted the rails right into the deck. This allowed me to mount my steering wheel and assess the needed distance, angle, and height for my seat. I wanted to use my Simucube base on its motor mount, and despite the RSR-21 being pre-drilled for most wheels, this is one that is not on the list. So I marked the position for my 4 holes and drilled right through the deck. 4 bolts later, we had our wheel mounted and could start playing with the angle and seat orientation. I found I wanted my seat a little bit lower and played with the distance until the 2 were good. At my feet, I would be using the Wave Italy pedals that have an unorthodox pedal base that isn't really commonly supported on most chassis. However, with the large pedal deck of the RSR-21, I was able to use 4 wood screws and had the pedal set in just minutes. From there, I started making adjustments, moving the pedals closer, down a bit, and also a hint of recline. Soon enough, the driving position was taken care of and we could move on to the rest of my gear. The shifter is the AIO log shifter, which also has a non-standard drilling pattern. The RSR shifter deck will accommodate the typical Fanatic, Thrustmaster, and Logitech units, but in my case, it was back to the drill. I marked the position I wanted my shifter to be at and drilled the needed holes to then bolt my shifter down. I made a slight height adjustment to it and then moved on to the monitor. The mount here adjusts just like the rest of the chassis. 4 tightening knobs holding it in position. I knew with the weight of my large 49-inch curved monitor on the mount that it would be harder to adjust. So I measured the distance from the bottom of the monitor to the Visa adapter and adjusted the height of the mount to my desired position before installing the monitor. I then bolted the Visa adapter to my monitor and had my brother help me move it into position and locked it down on its tightening knob. Bam! Just like that, we have our monitor set. The final step is to add my mouse and keyboard, and then we could run our wiring and be ready to race. With all of our equipment mounted, the Rock Solid Rigs RSR-21 no longer looks naked. It actually looks ready for the task. It looks ready to race. And I'll tell you that all of the adjustments were very easy to make. All of the positions in the end ended up being perfectly ideal. My seat's exactly where and how I want it. The pedals, the wheel, the monitor, the shifter. The shifter doesn't have as much front to back as I would like, but it's really close to where I would put it anyway and had all the up and down adjustment that I needed. And most importantly, once I sat in it and pressed on the pedals or moved the shifter or the wheel, I could already tell how rock solid this rig is. It blows my mind just how stiff, just how strong this chassis is, and it dialed into a perfect GT driving position. So let's talk about getting it out on track and see how it performed while driving, while racing. And for me, with any rig, it starts with just getting in and out. In and out of the rig for some people is a no or no-go on a rig purchase. And with the Rock Solid Rig RSR-21, the seat is in a relatively high position, making it pretty easy to get in and out of. So for those who hate climbing down to the ground to get into their rigs, they're really going to appreciate that. In the rig, the seat's comfort is the responsibility of the user's choice. Mine's comfortable and allows me to focus more on its position in the rig than its actual comfort. It's rare that a sim rig actually has up and down adjustment for the seat and also for it to be adjustable in angle, and this chassis doesn't fail you there. I easily found the perfect angle and height. With that said, my wheel was also the exact height, distance, and angle, and that made for very friction-free turning of the wheel. Despite using a monster horsepower wheel, the wheel deck proved not only to be strong and wiggle-free, but was also what I would define as flex-free with zero wiggle. The wooden deck is as strong a wheel deck as I've ever tested. It just doesn't move at all. The deck's assembly tightening down using those knobs with the lower portion slotted for angle adjustment. I did have concerns, and I have had other rigs fail when using hand tightening knobs to lock down before. However, between the construction and the design of the rig, as well as the textured knobs which allow for extra grip, the RSR-21 proved rigid and never came out of adjustment. And when needed, I just had to loosen the knobs and make the adjustments as easily as with any rig I've ever tested as well. With the heavy monitor at the center, I was also a bit concerned about wiggles, wobbles, and vibration. But for any of that to occur, the rig would have to have wiggles and wobbles. But the super strength of the RSR is not limited to just the wheel deck. It's the entire central upright, standing rigid as could be and not moving a bit under heavy loads. This also meant that the monitor did not react in any way to the forces of driving in sim. The monitor's placement was in a good position for me personally, but I did have it as far away as I could get it. Taller drivers will be a bit further back, but the monitor can actually move closer if needed. Now, the heaviest load my rig takes is usually at the pedals. The amount of pressure that my legs can generate against a heavy pedal are enough to bend lightweight materials. and the cross brace supported 3/4 inch thick of plywood didn't even acknowledge the pressure of my foot. Even when looking zoomed in on the footage, I was blown away with the rigidity of the pedal deck in particular. This is likely the stiffest pedal deck I have ever tested, and it held strong in distance and angle. In fact, the way you lock down the pedals, the seat for that matter, literally locks them fully in place. With them sitting in grooves, knocking things out of alignment isn't a concern at all. And like the wheel deck, small adjustments can be made easily, and by removing the knobs, even big changes are easier than most rigs. The shifter mount was also rock solid. Shifters and handbrakes can put a large amount of load on a chassis, and their mounts are often overlooked as they are an afterthought on most rigs. In the case of the Rock Solid chassis, the shifter mount is well thought out. It's extremely strong, and my shifter didn't budge. No wiggle, no wobble. The shifter deck is just like every other part of the RSR-21. Super strong, dare I say it, even overbuilt. The final part of the driving review is the keyboard and mouse tray. With a single pivot point, it does limit its position, failing perfection. It is a great and much better solution than having your keyboard and mouse on the ground or on a side table. However, its positioning only allows for the basics while sim racing. There will be no playing other games or writing emails from that spot, but it gets the job done for sim racing. After hours of driving the Rock Solid Rig RSR-21 chassis, I was more than blown away by its performance. This rig matched or beat any rig that I have ever tested in adjustability and in strength, and coming in at a much lower price point than any I could compare it to. This rig really is made for anything that you throw at it, any of today's gear, and really could handle any of tomorrow's gear by simply drilling a few holes or throwing in a few wood screws. So I think that tells you everything that you need to know about the Rock Solid Rigs RSR-21, but to recap or simplify things, let's go ahead and break it down with the good, the not so good, and the bottom line, starting off with the good, and that being, it is amazingly stiff. It's astonishingly strong. I mean, there's no wiggle in the deck when you move the wheel. There's no flex at the pedal plate when you stomp on the brakes. And even when you're under extreme movement, there is just a hint of wiggle out of the monitor, almost none whatsoever under normal usage. It is extremely, and I dare say easily, adjustable. Pre-drilled and compatible with all common gear. And it's just a drill away from compatible with any gear out there. It is a very unique design. I'd even say it's one of a kind. It's inexpensive. In fact, this is one of the least expensive rigs we've ever tested, and that will vary depending on the cost of the seat that you need to add yourself. It's all natural. The smell of wood, it's environmentally friendly. It's very easy to adjust, no tools even needed. Very easy. The tightening knobs are extremely grippy, very strong, and they really secure in place very firmly. And then finally, and this is a little bit repetitive, but adaptability. And by that I mean, sure, it's pre-drilled for all the common gear, and it's the adjustability that means it's going to be able to fit any driver any way they want it to be. And the adaptability also comes into play when you're talking about not common gear, being able to just drill and put anything you want anywhere on the rig. And that actually goes beyond things like our steering wheel and our pedals. We could be talking about a button box. You need to put a Visa adapter, 4 wood screws, zap it in. Adaptability forever. And now on to the not so good. And it starts off with, it kind of has a little bit of a DIY look about it. Now I dare say, if you look at it under closer inspection, unless you've got a CNC machine and access to the finest wood, there's no way your DIY is going to come out as nice as the RSR-21. It's bare wood, and that's going to cause or allow for marks to happen on the wood rather easily. Look at what my shoes have already done to the cross brace in a short amount of time. Look at the scuffs on the side here from my shoes rubbing on them, getting in and out, and that's because it's bare wood. Exposed hardware, and that only adds to the DIY vibe or effect that you get with the exposed bolts the exposed hammer-in nuts, and various other hardware on the rig. Painting or modifying can void the warranty. Now in reality, that's kind of a shame because a coat of stain or some paint would go a long way in making this rig look that much more attractive, but at the same time, it's such a bulletproof rig, I can't see a scenario where you're gonna need the warranty unless you get this thing soaked in a flood or something that would actually damage the wood. And now on to the bottom line. I always talk about this on the show. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. To each his own. Different strokes for different folks. There's a reason that 31 Flavors has 31 flavors of ice cream, and it's because we all have things that we like or prefer, and others might like or prefer other flavors or other styles. When it comes to chassis, is it form over function, or is it function over form? There are those who really, maybe they're trying to keep it in a very modern, decorated home, or they're trying to keep it to appeal to their family so they don't think of it as like, why do you have a sim rig in the living room? Well, aesthetic appeal, something that is a gorgeous sim rig, is going to go a long way for those type of people, and maybe they are willing to even sacrifice some of the function of the rig. And then there are others who it's about their gear, it's about their driving position. Who cares what it looks like? I want the most out of my sim rig, the most performance I can get, and that's all that is important to me, and who cares about the fashion aspects of it? When it comes to the Rock Solid Rigs RSR-21, it is function over fashion, and it hits a home run when it comes to function with its stability, its adjustability, its ability to handle any gear somehow, some way, even if it comes to drilling holes or installing wood screws. It is as good as any rig that I have ever tested when it comes to what counts, and those are in the function category. It is hard to beat the performance of the rig, and coming in at only €551 or $641 in the United States, including the monitor mount, the shifter, and keyboard mounts, I would downright call it inexpensive. So the big question is, can you deal with bare wood? Are subtle structural lines more your thing? Because if the answer to those questions is yes, then this is the perfect rig for you. When it comes to my complaints, about the only thing or the biggest complaints for me are cable management and its finish. But then that's also the beauty of wood. You could throw some stain on it, you could paint it, you could install cable management hooks or little zip tie things to hold down into the rig yourself. That's the beauty of wood. However, if you do paint or stain it, it could actually void the warranty. I have to say, the Rock Solid Rigs RSR-21 was one of the biggest surprises of my sim racing history. I was really skeptical when it came in. I wasn't sure about using tightening knobs and whether they would secure things in place. I wasn't sure about the aesthetics of the rig. I wasn't sure if it would even be strong or stiff enough. It kind of even looked like a DIY project to me. And then I got it, I built it, and more importantly, I drove it, and I was totally impressed. I really have to say, they really impressed me with the structural rigidity of this rig, and that is so super important to so many sim racers out there. I hope that tells you everything you need to know about Rock Solid Rigs RS-21 sim racing chassis, and of course you can check it out at rocksolidrigs.com. I hope you enjoyed the show. Be sure to give it a big thumbs up if you did, thumbs down if you didn't, and most of all, subscribe so you can find out or get advanced warning when new videos come out. And if you'd like to help support the show, check us out at patreon.com/thesimpit, where if you join or help support the show, you'll get advanced previews of videos when they do come out. You'll be eligible for Simpit giveaways that we do and the Simpit patron trophy races. Thank you for watching. This is the Simpit. I'm Sean Cole, and I'll see you on the track.